Jeremy also lists teams that are on the right track, including both LA teams, the Broncos and the Commanders, who of course lost to your eventual Super Bowl champion, the Eagles, in the NFC title game. What do you have Washington doing to build upon their success of this season, Jeremy?
And offensive, defensive line. I have the Commanders fortifying that in a big way. In year one under GM Adam Peters, head coach Dan Quinn, they had to kind of piece it together the best they could. It did an admirable job, but I expect reinforcements there. Yes, I'm aware Washington fans desperately want that number 2 receiver opposite Terry McLaurin. I do think they'll address that in some form, but they could allocate more resources to that offensive line and a pass rush where they lose Dante Fowler in free agency. And also, they have a ton of good players that just played out one-year deals that they could bring back. Bobby Wagner played great. Zach Ertz was a really good target for Jaden Daniels. Safety Jeremy Chin. You'll see some of those pieces back most likely.
And I think more than some of the external factors, I think some of the intrinsic and internal factors need to improve, specifically meaning Jaden Daniels. What do I mean by that? Jaden Daniels, rookie of the year, what do you mean improve? Well, there's oftentimes this jump from year 1 to year 2 that oftentimes isn't a jump as high as you'd like to see. The reason why is that defenses have an entire year of film on what Jaden Daniels does well and what he doesn't do well. And so they can spend an entire offseason, coordinators will try and make him do the things he doesn't like to do. And so what needs to happen for this team to improve is that Jaden Daniels needs to find those areas of weakness and that he might think no one else knows, but Cliff Kingsbury knows, his coaching staff knows, and just work on those. That way you can have that sophomore year jump rather than a sophomore year slump.
Yeah, Sam's absolutely correct. You look at some of the things that happened for them last year, it might not happen again this season. They were the best fourth down offense maybe in the modern history of football. As good as you are, you can't count on that happening time after time again in 2025. They were 8-2 in one-score games. Again, that's impressive. Jaden Daniels did a big part in making that happen, but history tells us that is tough to keep up. And by the way, Jeremy mentioned a lot of players. A lot of those guys were on the older side. This was the 7th oldest team in football by snap-weighted age, so it's not necessarily as young of a team. Obviously, the core, Jaden Daniels is young, but not a lot of young guys around Jaden Daniels necessarily. So they have to do some work to get this roster better if they want to get the same results. The offensive and defensive line, as Jeremy mentioned, and I think a second key playmaker behind Terry McLaurin in that receiving core, whether that be a wide receiver or a tight end. A little too dependent on the Olamides and Kiases and Zach Ertz's of the world at this point of their careers. You want to see some young speed downfield. Maybe that could be a thing that helps the offense improve in 2025.
Yeah, especially when you consider that they are battling the Eagles, who are a very young team. And when you were talking about the sophomore slump, Sam, I just want to go back to this because, of course, the name that comes to mind is C.J. Stroud, right? So what can the Washington Commanders take from what we saw in Houston to help ensure that that doesn't happen?
Well, there's two pieces. One piece is, yes, you add another weapon. We saw that the Texans actually went and got a guy like Stephon Diggs, so it didn't work out. But the bigger piece, and I'll reiterate the point, is that you have to self-scout. Usually around halfway through the season, or maybe it's a bye week, teams will go and watch other teams. They'll go and watch their own film and see what are the tendencies that we have that we don't think other people know about that we want to get ahead of. That's what needs to happen, and that's going to be Cliff Kingsbury's job. That's going to be Dan Quinn's job, who actually did that for his entire career. He self-scouted his career and said, okay, what are my tendencies as a coach, as a coordinator? How can I get better? And that's why you're seeing this huge jump. And so for me, it's got to be up to Jaden Daniels. It's got to be up to Cliff Kingsbury and the entire coaching staff to say, hey, Jaden, I understand how excellent we were, but in order to not have that slump like we saw with C.J. Stroud, we're going to work on some of those little things. And maybe it's being more structured in the pocket. I get it. You love to move around. That makes you great. But let's work on being more structured in case you have a guy who's spying you. Maybe little things like that are things that you can do to self-scout and get better.
Yeah, I'd also say identify your identity. Figure out your identity and then build upon that. Understand what you are, what you want to be. The Texans last year, they were a run-heavy team in 2023. So they got last offseason, and they had Stephon Diggs, who's a good player, but not necessarily what they really needed. They needed offensive line help. They needed another tight end to help in their 12 personnel groupings. They needed to build for the team they were as opposed to the team they were kind of expecting to be. And so for the Commanders, if that's what you want to be, an RPO-heavy team, you want to be a team that runs Jaden Daniels, okay, fine, nothing wrong with that. But build off of that identity, not a different sort of identity, just adding talent for the sake of adding talent. That doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, the other thing that happens, of course, you can be a victim of your own success in the sense that your schedule's going to get harder. You're going to be playing on Thursdays. You're going to be playing in prime time, right? All those things that the Texans had to adjust to this past season.
How's it going, everybody? Villa Sports Network here. Just want to thank you guys for your support on the channel. Thank you guys for watching the video. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Also want to kind of remind you to don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment on the video if you like as well. But regardless of the fact, thank you again for your support, and hope to see you on the next video.